Welcome back to an obscure tour at the edge of the internet. I am your host, the Nameless Tour Guide, and today we will be discussing souls and humanity. We'll then be visiting the glorious Kingdom of Oolacile, and then we will be moving on to the old church in the woods. So let's get started with the discussion of souls and humanity. You've seen me use the souls already. If you look at the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there is a number, and that number is currently 4074, and that is the number of souls I currently have. Now, what souls are conceptually is the life force of a thing. Everything in Lordran has a soul. These creatures here have souls, as they have life. The chosen undead has souls, as it has life. But also, plants have life, animals have life, items also have a soul. So that is the soul. And in-game, these souls have many uses. One of those uses is to repair weapons. As the weapons are worn down by battle, we can go to a bonfire or to a blacksmith and repair them. And what's happening when we repair the weapon is that we are transferring our life force, or the life force we have gathered from killing these creatures, and transferring it into the item to extend its life force, to extend its durability. The other use for souls is with merchants. I can go to a merchant, such as the one over here, and I can purchase items from that merchant. I am exchanging my life force to the merchant in exchange for physical items like swords and shields. And what this soul can also be used for is leveling up the chosen undead. And when we level up the chosen undead, we are exchanging our life force, or the life force we have gathered, for skills and knowledge. So we jump into here, and I can add points to any of these parameters. Now, if I cancel out of this leveling up screen, notice the wording here. This will cancel reinforcement. Is this okay? Notice if I go to confirm this reinforcement, it says confirm reinforcement. So what we're seeing here is that the developers have purposefully chosen to use the word reinforcement when discussing the leveling up of the chosen undead. And that will come up later in this episode, so I just wanted to point that out now. And that is the souls, the life force of everything in Lordran. And that is counter to humanity. And that humanity can be found in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Currently, that number is set to 2. Now, humanity is a rather strange concept. The idea of experience points in RPGs is a fairly common trope, so the idea of the souls and leveling up is fairly common, I'm sure, to you. But humanity is rather unique to Dark Souls, so let's start by looking at what the developers say when they're describing humanity. The number of black sprites within one's bosom symbolizes human nature and determines item discovery and resistance to curses. And you can see in the chest of the chosen undead the humanity writhing within them. So to understand what humanity is first, it's easier to start that discussion by talking about the curse. We haven't come across the curse yet in gameplay, but what it is that some monsters have the ability to try to curse the chosen undead. And if they succeed in cursing the chosen undead, the chosen undead will die. And when they are reborn at the bonfire, with the cycle of the dark sign, they'll find that half of their health is missing. Half of our health has vanished when we have this curse. And what is happening with that curse is half of the physicality, or the physical manifestation of the chosen undead is being ripped apart and dumped into another world. So half of the chosen undead's physical manifestation is being placed in another world. And whenever we run around here, you'll sometimes see ghosts, and sometimes at the bonfire you will see other characters resting at the bonfire. There's a ghost there. That is another player moving through their version of Lordran. And Lordran is a place with multiple planes of existence, one for each chosen undead. And the physical manifestation that's being torn apart by the curse is being placed in one of those players' realities. And this can be seen when you come to an area with a monster that is able to curse the player. There are little statues of other players sitting there petrified. And that is that missing part of their vitality, that they're half of their physical existence. So that is the curse. So in relation to humanity, the more humanity we have, the more we are able to resist this curse. And the reason we are able to resist the curse is because we become more attached to this instance of Lordran, this plane of existence of Lordran. And that is happening in gameplay terms through the acquisition of more humanity. Our physicality becomes more rooted to this Lordran, as there are many of them. So there we have humanity. Our attachment to this realm of Lordran and the items and the things in Lordran that are attached to us are all being captured by humanity. As the developers state in the status screen that we looked at before, humanity represents human nature. And by that they mean not just the items that we find along our hero's journey, but also the people, also the experiences that we seek out. Those are all being represented by humanity. Our desire to see what's beyond the graveyard back at Filing Shrine. Our desire to see, to discover what is happening inside of Lordran as we explore it. All of those things are being represented by humanity, and also the people, and in the terms of lore, the people who become attached to you during that hero's journey. Now, Dark Souls is a very solitary game. Your character is quite stoic, but other characters who possess a lot of humanity, actually, a lot of their stories is also about the people who become attached to them, and this is why the sprites that represent humanity that are separate to you are being held within your bosom, near your heart, because the humanity is also about the people that care about you, not just you caring about the people of Lordran. And that attachment of others and other things in Lordran manifests itself in a strange way in gameplay through a mechanic called item discovery. The skill of discovering items on the corpse of a fallen enemy. So, like all loot games, the monsters in Dark Souls have a drop table, and that is a table of the items that they can drop when they die, and the probability that those items will actually drop when they die. And item discovery, so here we've seen an item being dropped. The item discovery that we have, which increases as we gain more humanity, increases the probability of this item being dropped, or any item being dropped. And so we were able to acquire this spear because I have 3 humanity and my item discovery is higher. And what that is this strange kind of item gravity. This weird concept that as I become more physically attached to Lordran, this plane of existence of Lordran, the items in Lordran become more attracted to me. And this is important to the lore of Dark Souls, as humanity has a related concept called the Dark. And the Dark is this slick sludge that eats away at the physical world. And what the Dark is all the leftover humanity. It's humanity that doesn't have a container. It doesn't have a bosom to be held in. It's not held within one's being. It just is pure humanity. And this humanity has the property that's being expressed with item discovery. It has the ability to attract the physical things that it desired in Lordran when it was still a sentient being. It can pull other items into it. And this is why it eats away the physical world, because it still has this item gravity. And just like gravity in physics, it can come together, this Dark, and form something like a black hole. And that black hole in Lordran is called the Abyss. So that's a quick summary of what humanity is. And we'll be discussing it in more detail in different places along the journey. But that's kind of the summary for now. And a byproduct of this humanity, as we acquire it, is that I will acquire, in my playthrough of Dark Souls, an awful lot of junk along the way. So I'm getting a lot of these hollow soldier helms along the way because I have such high humanity and the items are drawn to me. But the item that I'm actually looking for are the Titanite shards, but I'm unable to know whether I'm going to get that or not. When a creature falls and an item spawns, and so I will end up acquiring many different useless pieces of junk along the way. And notice here I was able to pick up a soul. That is the life force of this creature who has given up. This creature isn't dead. This creature has just given up on life and collapsed at this point. Since the flames have faded, nothing can actually die. And so we now have these souls that we've acquired along the way, and these are the life forces of these different creatures that have kind of crystallized on the corpse. Humanity does the same. Now, if I were to die doing this with souls and humanity, the cycle of the dark sign will happen, and I will be spawned at the bonfire. But I will have lost all my humanity, and I will have lost all of my souls. And what I need to do is return to the place that I died in an attempt to recover those souls and humanity. Now, if I don't manage to get back to where I died, it looks like I might not be able to. So here's the recovery point here. These souls will be lost forever, but the humanity might not. If you have more than 5 humanity and you lose that power, a different creature will spawn, which hopefully we'll be able to see through the playthrough, which is a vagrant. And vagrants are these strange little egg-type creatures that look like little tears in reality with little arms, and they attempt to terrorize other players in other realities by shooting lightning at them. And if that power is, that vagrant is not destroyed, it will move on to another plane of existence and attempt to terrorize people there, where they'll be stronger than they were before. And that's an important reminder that the humanity isn't your humanity. It's actually humanity of others that you've acquired along the way. It actually has its own being, its own reason for existence, and outside of yours. And will, if enough humanity is able to get together, spawn a different creature and start moving between worlds. And so you can see how vagrants are kind of linked to that idea of the dark that we were discussing before. And so that is humanity. And now the soul and humanity form a cycle, like we were talking last episode about cycles being the core of the Dark Souls, the core theme of Dark Souls. As you gain more knowledge and you turn that knowledge, or life force, and you turn that life force into skills and knowledge, you seek out more challenges and more things in the world. And you continue on that cycle of acquiring more knowledge and more items, and your attachment to the physical world becomes greater until you arrive here in the glorious Kingdom of Oolacile. So what happened here? This rather spooky forest area, which was once the great Kingdom of Oolacile. Well, Oolacile was a place of harmony and beauty. A place at the end of the world where everybody decided to get along and live in harmony and put all of their differences aside. What ended up happening here was the cycle of humanity and the soul. There was a group known as the Zansus Scholars. And these scholars did a lot of great research into controlling and manipulating light and time. to the point where they were able to repair items with a wave of their wand. They are able to capture light and use it and then illuminate dark places elsewhere with that light that they were able to control and contain. And as they made all of these great discoveries, they were awarded with brass medallions by the people of Oolacile. And these medallions denoted their success, and the medallions became very important to the Zanzu scholars. They did not care much for the actual sorceries that they produce, but the medallions and the respect that those medallions represented was what they prized. And so they continued to do their research until one day they unearthed an ancient god called Manus, Father of the Abyss. And Manus, the Father of the Abyss, was a creature who had so much humanity that it went wild, and the dark that was produced by his overwhelming humanity destroyed all of Oolacile. And this is why all of the area of Oolacile is kind of fallen away and sunken down into these deep ravines, is because the dark and the abyss, which is still down there, has eaten away at this physical world. And that was the story of the Zanzu scholars, the scholars who, for brass medallions, continued, used their life force, used their soul to seek out greater and greater research for more medallions, their humanity, the thing that they prized and kept them grounded to their version of Lordran. And that is an important idea with the brass medallions to the lore. There are a lot of people in Dark Souls in Lordran, who seem mad and wicked. But to judge them as mad and wicked isn't completely correct, because they're just doing what they believe is the thing that they are just experiencing life with looking for the joy that they find in the world. The brass medallions of the Zanzu scholars had no power. They meant nothing to anybody else, but they mattered to the Zanzu scholars. And that was what was important, was that they had found something meaningful and something that gave them joy with their life force. Even if at the end it caused a city of peace and harmony and beauty to fall into ruin. And the blue specks in the air represent that soul, that overwhelming life force and knowledge that was in Oolacile, and the earth was the dark that was produced from it. And now we come to the final destination for today's episode, the old church in the woods. I did not name this place the old church in the woods. That name comes from a tapestry map that you're able to get with a particular special edition version of Dark Souls. You can still Google images of this tapestry map, and they give this place, and that tapestry map gives this place the name, the Old Church in the Woods. And it is a very important place in Lordran. By the architecture, it seems to be the second building built in Lordran after Firelink Shrine. And the person who was worshipped here is extraordinarily important to the story of Dark Souls, and so I needed to pick the Master Key so that I can introduce this character now, because their influence is everywhere. So to introduce this character, let's start by looking at this relief that we see around the top of the old church in the woods. This relief can be found everywhere in Anolondo, the city of gods, and links this place to a god from Anolondo. Notice also that there is an alcove where a statue once stood, and that statue has been removed. And also notice this simple podium here. So, who was the god who was worshipped here, whose statue has been removed? For those who have played the game, you may think that it is the firstborn of Gwyn. But there was actually two gods who had their names removed from the annals for their foolishness. One is the very famous firstborn of Gwyn. The other, though, was the god that I was just talking about, Manus, the Father of the Abyss. That is the title that he is given when we meet him in the game. But before he was the Father of the Abyss, he was Manus, the blacksmith deity. And if I was to kill this creature, which I can't right now, but if I was able to kill this creature, we would get an item called Demon Titanite, and the Nameless Blacksmith deity is mentioned on that item description. And as I just strafe and dance around this character, notice the design. This creature's design is the story of Manus, the blacksmith deity, and what happened to him. For those who have played the game and might want to know how you can see that similarity, if you look at a picture of Manus, you'll notice that he has the arches on his back, just like this creature, and you'll also notice the hand. This creature uses the hand, much like Manus uses his hand during his battle. And the reason that this creature has the same physical appearance as Manus is because when Manus died, these creatures rose up from his body. So just be noticing all the little details and visual aspects of this character design, as they will be important in spotting Manus's symbols as we travel through Lordran. So who was Manus? In the Age of Ancients, when Gwyn was fighting the dragons, at some point he came across an exceptional human being. And that human being was an extremely gifted smith. And he created all of the weapons that you saw in the opening cutscene. Manus created all of those weapons. And then when the dragons were beaten, and Gwyn inherited, and the other lords inherited the earth, it turned out Manus was also a great architect, and he built all of the cities that we will travel through on our journey. From the very simple Firelink Shrine to this place, to the much more elaborate cities. That was all done by Manus, the blacksmith deity. And because of this exceptional skill, and because of this exceptional devotion to the gods, Gwyn made Manus a god as well. Just an ordinary human being with exceptional skills. Manus is kind of the Da Vinci of the Dark Souls series. And he is one of the most important characters. We'll be going through all of his many, many exploits as we continue along. And that's why I need to introduce him before we start our hero's journey, is because the flowchart of Dark Souls lore is kind of, did Manus do it? If no, did Velka do it? If no, did Priscilla do it? And if no on that final question, you've got a lot of work to do, because the symbols of Velka, Manus, and Priscilla are all very well defined. But the other characters, you have to do a lot more legwork to figure out their influence. And speaking of those symbols, just as I said in the last episode, that the story of Velka can be seen through the cycle of the Firekeepers. The story of Manus can be seen through the cycle of the Blacksmiths, and in whatever form they're in. For those who have played the game will know what I mean by that. And here we see Manus, as he was in the Age of Ancients before he became a god. A simple, carefree blacksmith who cared only for weapons. Until he descended and became this creature. And before he descended a second time and destroyed Oolacile as Father of the Abyss. So that is Manus, a creature of great humanity, and with an amazing life force. And so with that amazing life force, he was able to do much in his constant search for more challenges and the things he desired in the world of Lordran. So leaving Manus for now, let's have a chat to the friendliest blacksmith around, Andre of Astora.
Well, you must be a new arrival. I'm Andre of Astora. If you require smithing, then speak to me.
We can learn hurrah from Andre, because he's a fairly happy-go-lucky guy. And now let's just quickly go through what he says at the beginning.
Most weapons and armor are mighty sturdy indeed, but every hunk of metal has its breaking point. If you notice durability running low, it's time to repair. You can ask a blacksmith like myself, or do it on your own with a grindstone. The nice thing about weapons, they never betray you, so pay them a little respect, eh?
So that's discussing the repair mechanic that I was talking about before, where you can use your life force and your souls to repair your weapons.
There are two types of weapon forging. There's reinforcement and there's ascension. Reinforcement is simple. It strengthens the weapon and nothing more. A simple task for any blacksmith. Hell, you could even do it yourself with a smith box. But ascension's a finer art. It alters a weapon's properties. Ascension is the territory of we blacksmiths. A smith box just won't do the trick. Start out with reinforcement. When that loses its charm, you can consider ascension. As you've noticed, this land is flush with the mad and wicked. You won't make it through the night without employing my services.
So there's a few things to discuss there. And the first one is the idea that we were talking about
Neither of us want to see you go hollow.
the last episode of cycles and transcendency. So the reinforcement of a weapon is that very idea. We can reinforce this weapon with Andre here, and using Titanite shards, I can make this a +1 broadsword. But once I have gotten it up to a particular level, I will then be able to, using special embers, special fire. Once again, we're seeing this bringing together the idea we discussed last episode of the first flame burning those knights and causing them to transcend. We can use embers, special embers, to have our weapons move from one state into a completely different state. And that is the idea of transcending, again, of the transcending of the cycle where the weapons become something more than what they were. So that's a reiteration of that idea using the weapons of Dark Souls. The other thing you may have noticed is the use of the term reinforcement when talking about weapons. Just like we talked about the reinforcement of the chosen undead. And this means a couple of things. One, it's the idea that the item is the weapon is a living thing, just like the chosen undead. It can be reinforced and improved upon. What it also represents is the idea that we are reinforcing the chosen undead. The chosen undead in itself is a weapon, is an item that we are reinforcing. And just like the weapon has an ascendancy, that is also the idea around the story of the chosen undead, this idea of trying to transcend whatever cycle we are in, the cycle of the dark sign. Let's talk to Andre Vestora again.
You can forge armor just like you do weapons. Forging armor is even easier than forging weapons. Whether you forge weapons or armor first, well, that's up to you. But nobody wants to see you go hollow. So whatever you do, you'd better do it well.
And that's a fun little reference to the idea of what happens when the player goes hollow. We'll discuss that at a later date. Another thing I just want to point out quickly is notice the weapon of the creature over here. And then notice the blacksmith tongs sitting next to Andre of Vestora. That is the inspiration, visual inspiration for this weapon. And so, having now explored the old church in the woods and having introduced Menace, the blacksmith deity, one of the two most important characters in Lordran, the other one being Velka, goddess of sin, we are now ready to finally go on our hero's journey. So if you're a bit tired of hearing all these discussions of souls and humanity, fear not, that is all done. Now, just quickly, as I head back to Firelink Shrine, I do want to point out this very neat addition to the remastered version of Dark Souls. This is not in the Prepare to Die edition, so this was a cool find before. Let's try not to die here so that I can show off this cool feature. Here, underneath the undead church, we see dark. This was the slick goop that I was talking about before, which slowly eats away at the world, the physical world. It's all leftover humanity that has come together. So that's a pretty neat addition to this version. I quite like that because it is very much related to what happened in the undead church, and we will be getting back to that. So, as I was saying, next episode we will be discussing the Way of White quickly, and then we will be ascending the Watchtower and fighting the second boss of the game, finally. But now that we have introduced Menace and Velka, you can be looking out for those two everywhere, because they are absolutely everywhere. So that's everything for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Today we discussed souls being the life force of creatures in Lordran. We talked about humanity and and how it represents the physical attachment to this existence of Lordran. We discussed Oolacile and the fall of Oolacile and the Zanzu scholars that caused that. And we introduced Menace, the blacksmith deity. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time. Bye.